What are the tools and things that are available to you, to us, when it comes to revisions, doing revision type of work? And even as we review some of these tools that you see today, you may find that some of these things are useful to you even outside the context of revisions. But we're just kind of jump through a couple of the different features that may be helpful along the way. So I'm gonna first thing as you get started on a revision type of job. This is almost even just outside of the software itself. My first recommendation in most cases, if you're going to be doing, it's like you did the job, you did the estimate work and it was completed previously, and now there was a bunch of changes and you needed to kind of revise that and work it. I usually recommend coming to your job file before you even open it and just making a copy of it, setting it aside. And maybe you may, rename this and you make this to be, your revision work. And so the reason for that is it just leaves behind a permanent copy before of what you have done previously, and then you have sort of your revision work. So if you ever needed to revert back and just go back to just your original, that can be a great way to do it. Another way to do it would be to do a save as. You could certainly do it that way as well. But making a copy of it and renaming it, that's a great plan as you work and jump into revision work. But beyond that, then once you have the project open, I'm going to jump over here to the material list tab. One of the things also, if you're going to have a need to be able to reference back to what the original material list was like, and which we'll touch here at the end, if you want to be able to run a report and see some add and subtract lists, like what was added, what was subtracted in the revision type work, then again, what I recommend doing as you come into this job to begin with is to come to your original list, right click on it and choose to copy list. And we could call this house, and we'll call this, and I would recommend labeling it something that's very clear. So I'm going to call this original list, from, February 2022 or whatever that the case may be. But it's just kind of really clear of what this estimate list was. You're going to want to retain the inputs, but in most cases, I would say just leave the rest of these blank. You're really just trying to get a raw list of what the material set was. So I'm going to click OK. And so now I'm going to end up with a second list here. what was set. That becomes kind of a baseline. So then as I go back to rework on what's now the house, that still has all the linked takeoff items and everything in it, I have something else to compare to in the future, and we'll get back to that in a moment. So as you get started into revision, that would be certainly some good things to keep in mind. If you work with framing layouts, another thing that you would also get a benefit from is on the general tab here, there is an option for a revision date. So looking at a framing layout here, if I was to look at, say, this upper floor framing, I can click view, and down in the lower right hand corner here is the creation date for when this was actually made or created, this layout was. And if you want to, if for your purposes and how you tend to use things, if you want to come back to the general tab, and let's say we fill in a date here with something a little bit more recent, such as today. Now, if I was to go back and create a new framing layout and look at a layout again, what that's going to show me then this time is I'll still have that original creation date of back in 2019, but then I have a revision date now here that's set with current today's date. So that would be another field that you might want to leverage especially if you're using framing layouts, make that date entry there in the revision field. So a lot of those are kind of preliminary type things, but now then, okay, so what are some other things you can help leverage as you work with revisions? Often what happens with a revision set is you're going to get a different set of plans that are come in, right? You're gonna have different, and so to keep those things separate or collected together nicely in your list, one of the things you can leverage would be folders in your pages list. So I'm gonna create a folder here. I'm gonna call this my original plan set. I'll call it as. And so now I've got a folder, and I can actually select all these at the same time. I'm just gonna do a multi-select using Shift and drag all these inside of this folder. So now I have my original plan set here, and it's all nicely collected into that folder there. I could create another folder then for revision set, right? And probably would be better to give it a date, depending on what it is that it is, and so now you could have two folder sets, and you could have as you import those pages, you could keep those separate and organized more clearly. So again, another way just to help keep everything straight as you work through a project. Moving on from there would be as you get these new pages in, is how you can leverage overlays in order to do as you're working with a revised set of plans. Now, there's a couple of tools here that are helpful. One would relate to, okay, how do I find what's different about a particular revision page? So I'm going to turn off the drawing here. And so just as a simple example, I've got a couple of pages here in my pages list, you'll see. And one of them is sort of the original third level, 001 page. And that's where I did my drawing. So here's my original. And now I've got this new sheet in here, which I threw on this extra cute little icon here just to make it clear what page we're looking at. But there are some differences actually on this page. So how can I lay this over the top of my other page and be able to see what's different? So you probably are already familiar with the overlay feature, which is fine. So I'm going to come here. In case you're not, I'm going to come to my page that I want the overlay on. So I'm back on my original page. And I'm going to right click on the page that I want to have as an overlay. So I'm going to come in here and add this page as an overlay to the current page. So now I've got my new sheet laid over the top of this one. And that can help with being able to find where things are overlaid, what stuff compares, what stuff doesn't. But now take that a step further, and in the markup items, coming here and saying we want to do a compare overlay. So I'm going to compare that overlay to the page image there. So now anything that's an exact match just goes transparent in that overlay, and stuff that's new is red. So, like here's a new wall it's been shifted over. It used to run through here, now it shifts down and over this way. The blue would be what is old. It's on the original sheet, but it's not in the new sheet. So that makes it a whole lot easier to go around and try to find, okay, what's different, what impacts me in the portion of the material list that I'm working with, what doesn't impact me. Okay, so that's another effective tool. But there's one other way to leverage when it comes to overlays for revision type work, and that is to actually slip that page, the new page, underneath the original. So I'm going to come here back to I'm on my original page here, and I'm going to show you here that I have my drawing on. So, this is some basic drawing I've done, but you can imagine you can have a pretty complex set here, right? Where you have, floor joists, floor system, headers, and wall assemblies and everything. You really don't want to have to move those to a different page or try to copy and everything, because there's just a lot of things that could happen along the way. Always better to just be able to keep everything in its original location. So how can I get this new sheet underneath it and for it to behave like the sheet itself? Like make it respond to the page visibility and so on. And so there actually is a way to do that. I'm going to come over here to the markup items list. Here's my overlay. One of the other options that you can do, I'm going to turn it off of a Camera overlay first. And just back to a standard overlay here. One of the options is down at the bottom where it says set this overlay as the background image for this page. So essentially what I'm saying is I have a new sheet here that I've laid over the top of revisions, but I really want to slide this underneath everything and have this be my sort of background image now. So I'm going to set that. And now you can see that image is, evidenced by our little Saturn icon here, is now behind the image, and it'll actually will be responsive to the page slider, and it's actually, so it's now sort of the background image. And if you were to add more overlays to this and do a compare overlay, this is now the one that's going to be the target for the compare overlay. If you take advantage of your framing layouts and you do we go like a page visibility override, it will respond to the page visibility override as you do framing layouts and so on. So this really has essentially become the background image now and is no longer just an overlay. So that's is another effective tool to make revision work easier, still get accurate framing layouts and be able to see your drawing over the top of the new sheet rather than having to see it in the old. Okay, so we talked about overlays, inserting sheets, and so two other things just want to touch on here yet, two other tools related to doing revision type work. One is going to be for framing layouts, and if you do any kind of work like that, so you can see here I have a collection of say 4 framing layouts here. And, if I view them all, I can see I've got, these different pages and stuff going on. So I got different stuff happening here. Now, if I'm doing a revision work, I may find that maybe some or even all of these framing layouts will need to be updated. They're no longer going to be accurate, right? Because I've captured that image from an old time, and so now it's, what's showing in the image is no longer correct. So what you can do though is you can use the viewport recapture feature. And what that does is it remembers what page that you were on. So notice here I'm on just this arbitrary page over here, but I want to actually recapture this viewport or this main floor headers plan since I've made changes and updates and I wanted to get all the latest stuff. So if I click on viewport recapture, I'll click yes, it's going to go find that page and remake that image based on the viewport that I had set originally. So notice not the whole page, it's just the area that I had captured. And it pulls it in. Now, so that's handy enough, but then let's say that, we have 10 or 12 or 15 of these layouts, maybe if you're doing a large multifamily. So what you actually can do then also is come up to the top and you have the option for here, this view capture the selected framing layouts. So I've already done that one, so I'll maybe check that one off, but I've got these other three. I'm going to click this and it's going to ask me if I want to select all those. It might take several minutes. It says, if you have a whole bunch of them, but actually it's pretty quick. Click yes. And it's going to go back and find all those original viewports and it's going to recreate those different pages with those, getting the latest information, and then the material list will be populated. So that can be a great time saver as far as if you are leveraging framing layouts. Let's see, and I see a question here. Can you adjust the background image on the layout and make it darker? So you have control over the slider bar here, so you can control that. And if you want your layouts, so if your layouts currently are making it like, really dim like this, and you want to control that, you can just leave it set up high for the capture. Or if it's seeming to override that for you, a place to check that would be over here in your project tab, framing layouts tab, and up here would be a spot to check. If it's set to page visibility override, this is usually handy to have turned on because it will dim the background some, but if you feel like it's dimming it too much and you want it to be more like, 50% or whatever, then you can adjust what it gets dimmed back to as it captures those framing layouts. So yeah, good question. All right, and then last thing I want to touch on here as we kind of run through some revision type options. One, it relates to reports. So I'm just going to come and make a quick change here just so that we at least have something to work with. Let's say that I come to, let's see, what can I change here easily? I'm going to change this Lally column. Instead of 1 8-footer, I'm going to make it 1 10-footer. And maybe I'll add in, a bundle of shingles. Okay. So how can I find out what changed in my list? And how can I create a sort of comparison report, an add and subtract list? Let's go over here to reports. Now you could edit an existing report to do this, or you could add a new one. I'm going to just choose to add a new one here. I'll call it my compare report. Now you will need to choose a style that's either condensed or direct ship. I'm going to choose condensed, so it's still fairly granular and gives me an idea of what's going on. So I've got my condensed report. And now I'm going to come down to the bottom and I'm going to choose a list comparison option. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to, for example, I can say, what do I want primarily to show? And if I want to show, what's going to be, what's the original list, then what changed from that, I'm going to go ahead and house original list from February 2022 to be my primary. And then I want to compare that to the house list. So you might do this, you might reverse those in some cases, just depends on what your needs are, but you'll see how this comes out. So we'll click, so since I have this labeled, I'm going to click OK. So I've created my report, now I'll choose to view that report. All right, so as it pulls it up, and as expected, it shows me here's what the original list looked like, from February 2022. And so from that, as I come down here to the bottom, in order to get to my new house list, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to add in bundles of shingles. and my, 3-inch by 10-foot, or sorry, my bundles of shingles here, I have, oh, and I think I'm currently not showing, here, let's close this. I'm gonna, there, by the way, there's a new feature coming, spoiler alert. Show quantities on reports, so you can actually control that now coming in the future in the next release, which is just around the corner. Come here and we'll view this again. So here's my quantities. So we've got this down here, and here's my quantities from, here's the ad list. So here's my ads. I need 4 bundles of shingles to be added in. I need 1 of this 3-inch by 10-foot Lalycolm to be added in. And then I also need to remove from that pack, I need to remove a 3-inch, by 8-foot length. So that shows you how some of that can work with adds, subtracts, to be able to give sort of a breakdown of how it is that we can do that. So yeah, so those are some things to keep in mind. You can go over to just go quick review, just real fast, and if you have any questions, be sure to chat in. And I see one question up here that we might be able to touch on too as well, that might answer live. But just, setting up your files to begin with, making a copy of the file if needed, make a copy of that list in the beginning. That way you sort of have that to go with. Folder views in your pages list. Leverage those to keep your pages organized, so know what revision belongs to what. Overlays, both versions, using the compare overlay to find changes and also inserting sheets underneath. And then the viewport recapture, and then finally these compare type reports. So all those can be, very handy tools as you go through the revision process. Yeah, and you may also find uses for those as well, just outside of the revision structure. There's a question here about, why not clone the original list and then do an overlay. You can do that. That's an option. One of the, as far as, why not, as far as from my perspective, it depends on what your needs are, I think, is what it comes down to. In my case, where all I really want is I just want a sort of just a fixed record, then that keeps my file much more lightweight. I don't have a whole bunch of extra takeoff items that I've generated and everything else. I just am dealing with just still only my original drawings that I can then adjust and stuff. But yes, if you wanted to use the clone feature where you sort of duplicate all of your drawing information and everything, you could certainly do that as well. I just tend to go more toward the other, at least initially. If I don't need all the extra drawing material, then that just keeps everything else, that much cleaner. But yeah, good question. Let me see if there's any other ones before we kind of and yeah, great question to wind down with here as we finish up our webinar today. Thanks for hopping on. Someone's asking, how can we find the recorded sessions? If you go to, I'll show that. If you go to the Help and Online Learning Center, and we'll see if this pulls up something reasonable that we can look at here. Okay, you can go to the knowledge base right here and go to training videos, and down near the bottom you should see webinar training video on demand, and this one right here, webinar training. That will bring you to our latest webinar sets. The recording for today will eventually show up into this playlist as well. You can also click on the playlist over here and see all the ones from the past. If you haven't seen some of these other ones that we did from the fall feature and summer and last spring, there's a couple of other sets here that are similar to this structure. We just do some sort of shorter tips and tricks. So this is where last week's is currently. It's front and center right now. The guide to quick check, and then this one as well as future ones will also be posted there as well. So feel free to jump in, throw a few more questions in the Q&A section, and I'll answer some of those here as we finish up. But I'm going to wind down this portion. Thanks again for jumping on, and we'll see you back again next week. Talk to you later.